Alright, if I tried hard enough, I could probably talk a lot of Christians into believing that almost any public figure is the Antichrist. And I could do this using the Hebrew alphabet and a technique associated with this Mexican coin. It's a 1 peso. I guess the fact that it's a Mexican coin isn't that dramatic, but remember this coin for later. That will be important. In talking about the end times, it's really easy to get bogged down in the weeds of biblical prophecy, but I do think we still need to talk about it because what we believe about the end is important because it changes the way we view life now. Can't emphasize this enough. Our beliefs about the end actually matter because it shapes how we live. To illustrate this point, the first thing we need to do is we need to talk about the Hebrew alphabet. Now, for a time, the Hebrew alphabet was actually the Hebrew numbering system. Each letter was assigned a numerical value, and that's how you would display certain numbers. You would put together the Hebrew letters, and so let's say you wanted to show the number 67, this is how you would write that. You would take the numerical value of these numbers, add it together, and then you would get 67. Now, this is important for communicating the value of everyday objects and doing everyday math, but then also Gematria became a way of communicating secret meanings. Let's say you're a 2nd century BC Jew and you're wanting to communicate something about the powers that be, and you want to mention someone's name, but you don't want to get in trouble for mentioning their name. You could use Gematria and then be like, here's the number of the person. And then people who know the Gematria system would be like, oh, I know he's talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, or whoever it is that they want to talk about. And the reason this is important is because in the book of Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, it says this: let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. And so what if I were to tell you that you take the name Elon Musk and his big company SpaceX and transliterate it into Hebrew like this? When you add all those numbers together, guess what you get? 666. Or the iconic Oprah Winfrey, who spoke into a lot of people's lives. If you took Oprah Winfrey and transliterated it into Hebrew, and then the Hebrew word for life, guess what you get? 666. But we know that the Antichrist is going to be like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so what if we have someone who's been kind of outspoken on behalf of Christianity, but is a little mainstream? So like we have someone like Chris Pratt, and he is talking a lot about God or Elohim. When we add those numbers together, guess what we get? 666. Now, obviously I'm being kind of playful, but you can see the danger of playing this type of game, right? With enough creativity and enough mathematical prowess, you can take a lot of public figures' names, add some certain ingredients to make it fit your hypothesis, and then all of a sudden, you have someone that adds up to 666. Given the timing of the authorship of the book of Revelation, I think a plausible interpretation, if we are going to add up the numbers, because we are encouraged to add up the numbers to a number of the man, could be Nero Caesar, someone who is the epitome of people who would oppress and persecute Christians. I think it's extra plausible because there are some textual variants of this verse in Revelation in which the number of the beast is 616 instead of 666. And if you know that the common name of Nero Caesar is actually Nero Caesar, once you remove that noon, you end up with a total of 616. So it seems like maybe the author is considering Nero Caesar or Nero, but this is for us to play the math games and try to interpret. But this will not stop people from going onto gematria.net and being like, the number of a man, Barack Obama, and finding that that does in some ways add up to 666. Even one of the pastors I grew up with, he played this sort of game with Haman the Wicked in the book of Esther, the villain Haman. If you add those numbers up, if you use the Aramaic translation instead of the direct Hebrew, you end up with 666. Now, like I said, the reason that I'm talking about this isn't because I want to play math games or I want to try to predict who the Antichrist is today, but rather to show you a way of thinking that that can sneak into the mind of the Christian and affect the way that we live in the world today. And it might end up being a way of living that leads us away from the way that Jesus called us to live. Let me show you what I mean by referring back to that coin we talked about in the beginning. When I flipped that coin, you will notice that that coin landed right in the middle of this bullseye. There it is. Now you might be thinking, that's really impressive. How did you get that coin to land in that bullseye? Well, it's very simple. You see, I have practiced for many years and I am a determined student of coin flipping, which is how I knew that coin would land exactly there. False, that's not exactly what happened. Here's what actually happened is I flipped that coin, and once I saw where the coin landed, I decided to draw the target. You see, if you draw the target after you already know where the coin is going to land, then it's really easy to get the coin to always hit bullseye. And so if you already think that Barack Obama or Donald Trump or Chris Pratt or Oprah Winfrey or I ran out of public figures because I don't watch enough TV. Spider-Man? If you already know that they're the target, then you could always just draw the bullseye around there. You can fudge the numbers. You can add a word so that the numbers match and add up to the number of the beast. And maybe it's not always about the numbers because, you know, the mark of the beast either goes on your hand or on your forehead. And so anytime there's a new technology that involves your hand or your brain, then people are like, okay, well, maybe this is the new mark of the beast, like from credit cards to barcodes to whatever. It can be that coin that lands in the bullseye if you've already decided that you don't like where that coin is going to land. This is called the Texas Sharpshooter Fallacy, by the way. And so here's how this pans out in real life. You're like, I don't like that politician or this person who's in charge. Let me figure out a creative way to make their name add up to 666, or figure out how they have some plan to do something with people's hands. And once I have that piece of evidence, then I know that they are the Antichrist. And if they are the Antichrist, then therefore they are the enemy of God. And if they are the enemy of God, then it is our duty as Christians to essentially hate them. They've essentially aligned themselves with the devil, and it is our moral obligation to come in opposition to them and despise them. In fact, it makes our hatred feel righteous, the opposite of what Jesus called us to do. And it's not just the barcodes or the mobile speed pass or 666 or 616, but I also see this pan out in the way that people interpret what the nations of Gog and Magog are, as referenced in the Old Testament. And because of that, almost every generation has done something like this. Well, Gog is obviously Russia. No, Gog is probably Iran. No, Gog is China. No, Gog is the European Union because of the 7 stars. No, Gog is the United States of America. You pick the country that you're like, I don't know if they're doing the right thing, and then you could be like, well, they are Gog or they are Magog because they are obviously the enemy of God, and so my righteous indignation against them is justified because, well, obviously they are the fulfillment of evil in prophecy. The identities of the bad guy change generation by generation, but the mechanism stays the same. You pick your target and you draw the bullseye around it. And once you do that, it then becomes really easy to justify your contempt, your suspicion, your hatred, your discrimination, maybe even your racism or bigotry. If we go to the furthest extent, maybe we're talking military action and violence against them. And sadly, you can end up feeling righteous about it because you created a theological framework that justified that hatred. Now, I do think we need to read books like Revelation and Ezekiel carefully and figure out what it means to live faithfully in times where there are forces of darkness at work. But in Matthew 24, where Jesus tells us that we need to be ready for the end, his way of saying to be ready for the end is essentially by telling parables of people who just did the thing that they were supposed to do, by doing their job, by being righteous, by living the way of the kingdom, the peace and the love and the joy and the beauty that Jesus called his disciples to. You see, the way that we get ready for the end is by looking like Jesus, not by trying to be our best at guessing who Gog and Magog are. I am much more concerned with treating other human beings as image bearers with the dignity and respect and love that Jesus showed not only to the Pharisees and some of his religious enemies, but also to the poor, the outcasts, the rejects of society. When prophecy and biblical apocalyptic literature become our way of justifying our fear or hatred, we are probably no longer reading it in a way that is consistent with people who follow the Lamb of God. Remember, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. by sacrificing himself in love. So even in a world where evil is a reality, if you are a follower of Jesus, let us be the people who follow the way of the slaughtered lamb. Long live the slaughtered lamb.